welcome to my channel on the best of fantasy. Today I am reviewing Wizard and Glass. This is book 4 of the Dark Tower series by Stephen King. This review is going to be spoiler free. I am simply going to mention the names of characters that appear in the book, and beyond that there are no spoilers whatsoever. And I will also put links to my reviews of the previous 3 books in the Dark Tower series, as well as a discussion of the first three books that I was part of that appeared on my channel a few months ago. So like every other Dark Tower book, Wizard in Glass is different from what came before. And this is something that I absolutely love about this series. You can expect the unexpected. The King goes for it. And I absolutely love this, that he is unafraid in his portrayals of humanity, but he's also unafraid to just do things that might seem really weird and really bizarre, but he makes them work. And so what you have here actually in the very beginning, this is a book essentially of 2 parts. There is a frame narrative and there is the story proper. And the two definitely relate to one another. These are together something that King uses to humanize the iconic character of Roland of Gilead. And it is a journey that I absolutely loved. I was in another world while I was reading this book. It was absolutely tremendous. And so I am most impressed with this series. I mentioned in my top videos of 2021 that I was in the midst of this book and that it probably would make my favorites of 2021. And indeed it has. It is my favorite of the Dark Tower books thus far, of the first 4. And it is among my very favorite books of 2021. So yeah, I have a lot of wonderful things to say about it. But I want to start with these epigraphs that appear at the beginning of the book, because the epigraphs, in a way, foreshadow all that is to come. And that is, of course, the function of epigraphs. But King very skillfully included these epigraphs. And the 2 parts of Wizard and Glass, as I said, the frame narrative and the story proper. The frame narrative is the ongoing story of Roland and his quartet of Susanna and Eddie and Jake and Oy. And then the story proper is a flashback. It is an origin story, if you will, of Roland, a coming-of-age story of a sort. And it features a much older quartet, which I thoroughly enjoyed being introduced to. Along with the pain of memory. It was just a very powerful experience getting to know more about Roland and where he came from and what made him the individual he is. So one of the epigraphs, there are 3 of them in the beginning of the book. One of them is from Shakespeare's tragic story of the young doomed lovers Romeo and Juliet. And this goes, Romeo is speaking, "Lady, by yonder blessed moon I vow, that tips with silver all these fruit tree tops." And Juliet answers, "Oh, swear not by the moon, the inconstant moon, that monthly changes in her circled orb, lest that thy love prove likewise variable." Romeo answers, "What shall I swear by?" Juliet responds, "Do not swear at all. Or if thou wilt, swear by thy gracious self, which is the God of my idolatry, and I'll believe thee." So this foreshadows the theme of young love, and it is a very prominent theme indeed in this book, Wizard and Glass. But there are also some wonderful hints. The parts about the moon, pay attention to those. That plays a very particular role in Wizard and Glass as well. So it's a really wonderful inclusion here. The epigraph kind of tells you what it's all about. When you look back and you read the epigraphs, you think, oh my goodness, there's a lot being foreshadowed here. So another epigraph is from The Wizard of Oz. And so let's read that. And this epigraph is more related to the frame narrative, whereas the first one was related to the central story. The second epigraph relates more directly to the frame narrative, and it is from L. Frank Baum's The Wizard of Oz. On the 4th day, to Dorothy's great joy, Oz sent for her, and when she entered the throne room, he greeted her pleasantly. "Sit down, my dear. I think I have found a way to get you out of this country." "And back to Kansas?" she asked eagerly. "Well, I'm not sure about Kansas," said Oz, "for I haven't the faintest notion which way it lies." And this, I'm sure readers would agree, relates very directly to the frame narrative and where the quartet, Roland's present quartet, are headed in their journey back to the path of the beam and to get them to, of course, the Dark Tower. So wonderful stuff in here, and some very eerie moments as well. Some echoes of plagues and pandemics and things that are scarily relevant to today. So it really made for some compelling reading, I must say. And then there's a third epigraph, which is a stanza from the poem that inspired it all, Robert Browning's Childe Roland to the Dark Tower Came. And this stanza reads, "I asked one draught of earlier, happier sights, ere fitly I could hope to play my part. Think first, fight afterwards, the soldier's art. One taste of the old time sets all to rights." And there's a bit of an undertone in the broader context of the poem to this. There's a sadness, a sorrow of looking back on the old times. And that is most certainly relevant to the story that Roland tells, the story within the frame. And so Stephen King really sets this one up brilliantly with these epigraphs, which, looking back, tell the entire story in a sense. But the frame narrative itself is just brilliantly done, very effective, and it continues the plot from the Wastelands directly. So not a blink of an eye goes by between the end of the Wastelands and the beginning of the Wizard and Glass. And so it picks up that story of the riddling, and both the riddling with and the riddle of Blaine. And eventually it returns to the quest for the Path of the Beam and the Dark Tower, as I said earlier. There are plentiful nods in this frame narrative, as you could see from the foreshadowing, but it's a very literal foreshadowing because there are plenty of nods to the Wizard of Oz. Very obvious and plentiful nods to the Wizard of Oz in the frame narrative part of this. So what King is doing is he's playing with worlds. He's playing with fictional worlds and real worlds and blending them all together in something that is bizarre and almost impossible to describe. So it is absolutely compelling and interesting and full of mystery and wonder and horror and dread. All of it just combined into one, and in a Stephen King sort of way. So I also think that the frame narrative is important because it tells us, the readers, how to feel about Roland through the eyes of the other members of his present quartet, meaning Susanna and Eddie and Jake and Oy. We are coming to understand this incredible, iconic character. We are feeling more and more compassion for him as the members of his quartet do. We get a hard look in this book at what made Roland what he is. And along with those members of his quartet, we get more and more glimpses into his humanity. And this I enjoyed thoroughly. I think this is one of the most effective origin stories I've ever seen. And so I think that Wizard and Glass is a wonderful addition to the Dark Tower series in that sense as well. It humanized Roland for me in a way that previously had not been done. I was fascinated by the character. I was even repulsed in some ways by him, by his obsession. But you come to understand that obsession when you read Wizard and Glass. You begin to really understand it in ways that you never could have conceived before. As for the story proper, what's within the frame narrative, this is the heart of Wizard and Glass. It is the time of Roland's youth. And it is when the world was moving on, but hadn't moved on quite as much as it has in the present of the series. This tale is from the time when Gilead was still clinging to the tatters of its legend. And the story is it's part fantasy, of course. It is part fantasy in the greatest tradition of Arthurian romance and quest narrative and that sort of thing. It's got a bit of mystery in it as well. And it's got plenty of Western in it, American Western. And that's obvious from the very beginning, the gunslinger, but it's really played up here in Wizard and Glass in ways that it hadn't been in previous books. But it also is part Shakespearean tragedy as well. And there's also, I would say, a lot of beauty in this story. Stephen King can absolutely be lyrical at times in his prose. There are some beautiful descriptions of landscape and people inhabiting the landscape and the cultures of this place and the relationships between the people who inhabit it. It's just really, really compelling stuff. Beautiful writing in places. King can be a very wonderfully beautiful writer. So once again, though, I think it's his insights into humanity that I find the most compelling about his writing. And I would say that the most poignant thing of all in the story is the quartet of Roland's youth. I so enjoyed getting to know Cuthbert and Elaine and Susan. And of course, let's not forget Shimi. All the members of his youthful quartet and the intensity of the relationships of youth is something that comes through beautifully in Wizard and Glass. Absolutely compelling stuff. And I also think that these bonds that are formed during these years, during these young years, these are the experience that we live through and that form us. These formative teen years have an intensity about them that haunts the dreams of our older years. And you can certainly see this at play as Roland tells the story of his youth. Stephen King captures in this the full pain of growing up and the dislocations that can happen as a result of growing up, the passage from childhood to adulthood, the wild beauty and abandon of first love, and the fraught journey of coming to understand one's parents and eventually oneself. So from the lovable to the repulsive, there are so many just colorful, crazy characters in Wizard and Glass. They have just stepped out of nightmare and legend, and they have worn the special quirks that only Stephen King could give his characters. And this is, for me, the heart of it, the characters, but also Stephen King's willingness to go for it, to do the unexpected, to go where his psyche leads, to go where the human psychological experience compels him. To sum it up, this was an absolute win for me, and I am so excited to continue in the Dark Tower series. I will be continuing actually next in a little while, probably in a couple months, with Wind Through the Keyhole. And then I will be reading book 5, the Wind Through the Keyhole being book 4.5. I guess that's the way you're supposed to talk about it. But I will be continuing from that to the book 5 proper, Wolves of the Kala. So yeah, I'm so looking forward to seeing where Stephen King leads me on this Dark Tower journey. Until next time.